Okay, y'all, welcome back to another episode of hashtag CB99 Talks. Today I have another special guest. She's one of my favorite fighters. Somebody I always wanted to chat with. She's a Muay Thai specialist, kickboxing specialist, MMA specialist. Let me know if I forgot anything.
That is about right.
That's about right. All right. But I actually, not to tell anybody's age, but I actually came across you maybe like back in 2008. That was like one
Yeah.
of the first times I seen you fight. And then I have to give you credit for making me a fan of MMA. I have to give you credit for that because there was a time when I was just kind of, I've been such a boxing fan, but when I seen you
Oh,
and like a
yeah.
few other fighters, I just really jumped into it. But she's back. She's ready to make a statement. She's got a fight coming up July 30th, Invicta FC 41. Kaitlin Young, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's no problem. So getting right into it, how's everything been? Like, how's training going?
Training's great. This is the first one I've done at home in a while.
Mm-hmm.
For the last few, I was going out to California. But we've been able to put together a pretty good camp here. We had just opened a gym in March, and then got promptly shut down 2 weeks later due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
But it's actually been really nice having that space and just being able to train there. And then I've got some really helpful grapplers and wrestlers that have been helping me out, as well as our own guys that are great at striking. So the camp's coming together. It's been good.
Good. So what's like your process really been like as far as, just like from regular camp to now, like how have you really been staying active even like since between your last fight and now? Like, well, let's say quarantine really started like in March. So like, how have
Mhm.
you been like getting to stay active and really get work with people between it, if you have?
Yeah, so we weren't in the gym for a month or two, a couple months,
Mm-hmm.
I think. Hardly at all, but our team would still get together and run sprints and stuff like that outside because it was finally getting nice here in Minnesota. But yeah, no, we mostly had been doing like bag work and stuff initially when we got back, and now, you know, when you got a fight coming up, you kind of have to say F social distancing and get the work in. So that's what
Yeah.
we've been doing. But I am being a lot more I'm sticking to a lot smaller group than normal, obviously, because you just want to cut down the possibility of coming into contact with more.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I see, like just like a lot of fighters get up, grind starts real early, even with this like pandemic going down. Like, how do you still like find the energy to stay motivated? Like, how do you do that? Like, you just block it out?
Yeah, I mean, it helps having a fight.
Yeah.
Like having that deadline always helps. And I had an idea that maybe it would happen. I'm really fortunate to be fighting somewhere like Invicta that can still do shows without a live audience. But like a lot of our amateur fighters, we're not quite sure when those shows will start kicking again because they're so dependent on the ticket sales.
Hmm.
Um, but having the date certainly helps, and just understanding that at some point it'll come to an end and there will be fights again and but yeah, I suppose you sort of block it out. And in some ways, it's almost easier as a professional because there there are less people out and about. There's less traffic in the gym. It's almost easier to find your time and your space to train.
Okay.
For especially doing 2 days and stuff. So
Hmm.
there's a little more room for you. It's not certainly not ideal for business, but it's great for training for a fight.
Yeah. Speaking of like less people, knowing that there's not going to be a crowd for the event,
Hmm.
is that do you kind of see that as like a blessing, or at the same time maybe not? Would it be hard for you to get up for the fight?
No, I don't care. I would fight in somebody's backyard. That doesn't bother me. I really like it because I think my corner is smart and I like being able to hear what he's got to say.
Hmm.
Um, and I've had a couple fights like that. I fought on this reality show. I don't know if you remember it, but this reality show that ended up never airing. But that was without a crowd, and fighting in Japan too. It's like silent, so you can hear everything. So I don't think it'll. I've done it a couple times before, so it won't be anything too new.
Oh, so what was that reality show? Was it like from just a few years ago, or was it like?
No, like we're talking 10 years ago, probably.
Okay, 10 years. Oh,
And
wow.
they put 16 of us in a house, and for 6 weeks, it was such a mess. Like, they didn't get the stuff ready with the commission, so they had to take us to another state to fight. We were supposed to fight multiple times, only did once. But in any case, made some good friends, but they never paid us, and then declared bankruptcy. So
Oh,
it was,
wow.
which then, if you lock somebody in a house and don't pay them, that's kidnapping. But
Really? Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So they got away with kidnapping and robbery, basically.
basically, yeah.
Robbery.
So
Yeah.
and that dude is still making movies. It's crazy.
Oh man, that's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So when something like that happens, that you bring that up, like, it's kind of like a hard road for a fighter sometimes, being
Oh
able
yeah.
to, just find like opportunities. Like, was that ever, when that happened, did you ever feel like kind of discouraged? Like, do I want to keep doing this, or just find another road?
I don't remember feeling super discouraged, but I think a couple people that were on that show ended up homeless because you left your job, no job.
Yeah.
Not many jobs are going to let you leave for 6 weeks. And then we all thought we were going to get paid, and it got delayed. I think back then, though, the opportunities for women were so few and far between that you already weren't doing it unless it was a labor of love. Like, it's not like now where people are thinking they can start making a living. Like for my first fight, I made $200 to show and $400 to win. It was like, it was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then what the highest women's paid fight I had heard about was still under 10 grand at the time. So it was like, it was not, people weren't looking at it like this is going to be my career. They were fighting because they wanted to fight, which is, is good and bad. I mean, it's really good. It's awesome that people are making money, but it does change the environment a little bit.
And was that very, very first event you did, was like that Bodog event?
No, that was the second one.
It was the second
Bodog,
one.
they were good to me. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Bodog, Jeff Osborne handed me and I was a broke college student at the time, so he handed me like a fat stack of cash, and I was pretty thrilled with that. But no, my first fight was about a month before that. My first pro fight was about a month before that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was like, just to let you know, that was whenever I first seen you fighting, was at Bodog.
Okay.
And, of course, the head kick to Misha Tate was like, that was the first time I seen a head kick, honestly.
Oh, okay.
I used to watch just like some early MMA stuff and then you really get into it. But then when I pulled this up on YouTube and I was like, dang, I just saw that. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I'm kind of into this. So
sure.
I've just kind of been following ever since. But you've been you got a chance to be a part of a lot of different movements early on with, bringing like women's MMA to the forefront and being like being on the first Invicta card, like, and now you're on the most recent one. Like, how does that feel?
Oh, it's really neat. Somebody did the numbers. I think this is going to be the 300th Invicta fight, provided nothing gets pulled from the card. It's pretty awesome. It's neat to be a part of it and kind of like see it through the transitions, I guess. Because now I would argue that in not entirely, but in many ways, MMA is one of the more equal sports in terms of men's and women's opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Well, when that first event kicked off, did you think it would pick up, just kind of knowing how certain things have went before? Did you think it was going to like have this longevity?
No. I mean, no. And I feel bad about it now, but I for sure thought they were going to just tank right away because like just prior to that, obviously the show thing happened. And then there was a show in Canada that was supposed to have us and went under, and Pro Elite, if you remember them, they went under And I had a fight scheduled. I was supposed to fight Sarah Kaufman. And like 3 weeks prior to that, we read about online that the company was going under. Like they didn't even tell us. So there had been so much disappointment. It was like, it'll be amazing if this fight happens and then we'll see. But I thought for sure they were going to fizzle out. But, you know, I didn't know Shannon at the time. So
being like, yeah, again, like being part of that, like major part of bringing, you know, women to the mixed martial arts world to the forefront, like seeing a lot of women like headline cards now and become superstars, like, does that just make you feel a little bit better? Like, y'all, you did accomplish something?
yeah, I mean, I think it was a group effort, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and I think that even starts, that doesn't even just start at the fight shows. Like that starts even on a more root level at gyms.
In gyms, yeah.
And the impression somebody gets when they train with you for the first time, you know, all of that really helps change sort of the greater culture or the idea. You know, when I first started fighting MMA, people were always surprised that it's a female, and now it's you know, largely because of Invicta, Ronda Rousey, women fighting the UFC, it's not surprising to people anymore. It's like, oh, that's cool. You don't get the
shock of it.
Absolutely, like, yeah, flabbergasted questions.
Yeah. Going back to you, as far as like what got you into combat sports, you know, I've seen your interviews too, but I just want to ask you personally, like, what got you into fighting? Like, you know, just picking a discipline, even back to Muay Thai first. You started Muay Thai, right?
Taekwondo first.
Taekwondo.
When I was young. I was like trouble when I was in school. So my mom caught me with drugs, so she pulled me out of school and made me basically study from home and get a job. And I had to pick an activity. I wanted to play football, but she was afraid I was going to get hurt. So I picked Taekwondo. I don't think she thought it was going to turn into what it has, obviously. Right. But so I did that for a while. And then my coach at the time, I competed a lot, but then he ended up getting deployed to Iraq because he was Army as well. And when he left, I was like, man, I still want to compete. And I had gone to a ref seminar, and they said, they were describing what you're allowed to do. And they had said, you know, we got to make sure people only hit with the foot, and we're not allowing them to hit with the shins. And I said, well, why do we, if it's the best way to kick somebody, why do we care if somebody hits with the shin? And they said, we need to keep the Thai boxers out. And I was like, why are you guys so afraid of Thai boxers coming in this competition? And then I found Muay Thai and so on and so forth. I did Muay Thai a couple years by itself, and then had a really hard time getting fights, and then I got into MMA.
Okay. And when you got into like MMA in the midst of your career, you went back to Muay Thai for a while. Did you just feel like did you go back to Muay Thai just to kind of polish up your skills, or was the money better?
Oh God, no. The money's way worse. But it wasn't something I had set out to do. I was struggling in my career. I'd hit a slide, and I knew I wasn't getting what I needed in Minnesota, so I went to Los Angeles, tried a few different gyms, but then I ended up meeting this awesome Thai trainer, and I was training with him a lot, and it just sort of happened. I had one fight with Lion Fight. I was like, man, I really enjoy this kind of training. I want to just do this for a while. So I fought Thai boxing in K1 for 4 or 5 years without MMA.
Oh, okay. And you went on a pretty good winning streak with them too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Having a chance to compete in all these disciplines, like which one did you kind of like favor the most? Like,
oh, I love Thai boxing. I mean, if I'm 100% honest, I don't know that I would have done MMA if I could have stayed busy in Muay Thai. I like MMA too, but Muay Thai will always be my favorite.
Okay. And being able to, I know, you know, been to so many different organizations, you know, when you fought different countries. So like, how beneficial was it for you to be able to really test yourself and not just necessarily be under like one umbrella? Like, was it really beneficial to you to grow as a fighter, being able to fight, different competition around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you get put in, like, you have an idea what fighting is like being in America, and it's very regulated, and there's a
Yeah, yeah.
commission and blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And other countries are not that way. So
Yeah, yeah.
um
Mm-hmm.
it's really good, and it's even something I recommend to all of our fighters when they're getting high level amateur first going pro is I think it's important to go into those situations where anything can happen and shit gets weird, and you just got to roll with it and fight. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really good for your development as a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it makes good stories when you're older too.
Right, right. Where was did you have one particular fight where you just felt like, wow, I don't feel protected anymore. I'm just like really going out of the box. Was there one fight that was like that for you where it was like, dang, these rules ain't the same as they are in like Minnesota or somewhere here in any of these states?
Um, a lot of it, yeah. I mean, like I had one fight where they were warning me. There was a big side bet on it, and they were warning me not to take any food or drink from anybody in town
Hmm.
because they'll drug you. It can happen.
Wow.
Um, stuff like that. I've had fights where the judges are all armed for some reason.
Hmm.
I've had fights where there may or may not be a doctor present, and these are risks, right?
Yeah.
um, or where the crowd is very anti-American and loud about it, and you can't stop 15,000 people.
Yeah.
I don't care who you got there. So there were many where there were elements of that, but
Hmm.
but but it turned out all right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I talked to some boxers, even like being cheated in the Olympics, getting there.
Yep.
They said there's been stories. And then like honestly, I don't feel like a boxer's really come out his shell unless he's gone to like United Kingdom or
Yep.
parts of Russia, because they don't know what it's like whenever like thousands of people millions of people are just throwing stuff at you or everybody's just against you. That's why I feel like
Yep.
you really kind of breaking like an international type of ice and really
Yeah.
felt the mental pressures. But
Yeah.
do you miss that in any way? Being tested
Oh
like that?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. I mean, and I may do more of it, like before I hang them up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think there's just, it's neat. Like different cultures have different attitudes about fighting, and I think that's something that people forget too. Is like I've had fights where you don't know you're fighting until you get there. They
Mm.
don't tell you, or there's no way in.
Oh
Like,
wow, really?
yeah.
Damn.
So you just, oh my gosh, all right, that's the only other person in this locker room in a sports bra. That's probably who it is. Like they
Right.
don't tell you, So I think it's good. Like it teaches you to roll with it and just go fight, and you can't control it. You can't control the other stuff, so you only control yourself.
Yeah. And that's like a really, really good example of, like when you say you go into a fight and don't necessarily come in with a blueprint, I mean, you really have no choice because you can't even do research on an opponent,
No,
right?
no.
So yeah. Yeah, that's like that's real. Like, so a lot of fighters here complain. I mean, they can't complain about, what you just didn't tell me. But, you know, moving forward today, like what is the how much do you feel like you've improved since, the beginning of your career up to now? Like,
Oh, so much. But you grow, like it makes you grow as a fighter and a person, you know.
mhm,
Of course, when you're younger, you're probably faster and more
mm,
athletic, but
yeah,
but uh, but you hit harder when you're older, and you have like a different maturity and patience about things. So, um, I think those experiences really helped me grow a lot.
okay. You deal with like start to deal with pressure, not as much stage fright anymore.
Yeah, and just understanding, I think too, um, I don't know, like having a different understanding about it and being a little bit more like I'm less hard on myself now than I was when I was younger. And I think that helps a lot. Helps you perform better.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like you kind of learn to give yourself a little more credit for
Yeah.
what you do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay, so moving forward again, this fight coming up is at featherweight. Again, like I said, I followed you. The Ultimate Fighter. There was a time, they were gonna come up. Well, they did. They came up with the featherweight show, and like, you know, I was looking. I remember Cyborg. She posted like a footage of all the people trying out, and I remember seeing you there, and I was like, okay, they're gonna have some good, really tough competition, some veterans in there. What happened with that?
They didn't take anybody who had experience.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really weird. But I mean, if you kind of see what's happened to the women's division in the UFC as of late, that's
Yeah,
what's happening.
yeah, I
And
did.
I think they're probably looking at, do we bring these veterans in who are going to just be you know, a really tough time for some of these. I mean, three fights, 4 fights, that's nothing. In the grand scheme of things. So they know that it's going to be difficult to build these newer girls if they have veterans in there that are just going to come knock them off and probably retire
Hmm.
soonish, right? Um, but it was disappointing because there were a lot of tough chicks there, and they did not. I don't think almost anybody with 10 fights or more got called. But it's 45 is not the only division it's happened in too, which is a little strange to me because you've got, for example, 125. You got Valentina who had like 50 Thai boxing fights before her MMA career.
Hmm.
Um, that's a lot of experience. So like you're not gonna get anybody who can touch her who's got like 10 fights. And it's not that person's fault. It's like when you're in third grade, it's not your fault you're in third grade, but you're not in high school yet. And like to test them the same doesn't make sense. So like but what you don't see is like where's like Vanessa Porto,
Hmm.
right? She's been on a streak looking great, same
Yeah.
weight. She's the sort of fighter who would give these more experienced fighters a run for their money. But a lot of those ladies aren't getting signed. I you know and I understand that you need to build the division and that kind of thing. And there are some really awesome young up and coming prospects they've been taking, which is great. But then it also is kind of like looking at the sport as a whole and how the fans are going to see it. If the women you're signing have less than 10 fights and you're putting them on a card next to a 35-13 Masvidal, the contrast, the average fan is looking at that contrast and saying, this is women versus men, not understanding also you're seeing, no, this is a 5-fight fighter and a 50-fight fighter.
Right.
And that I think makes for an unfair comparison of what men and women can do
Hmm.
also. And I think that's probably kind of detrimental to the sport. It's not to say there are never any newer guys signed, but the majority of men getting that top billing are the more experienced ones. And it's just a bummer that women aren't being pushed in the same way. They're pushed early and then cycled out. Like you got like Liz Carmouche, they just cut. Why? Like, stuff like that. Um, so that's concerning, I think, because I feel like it's a step backward from where we were headed.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, uh, is me watching, all these UFC fights and how they kind of do things, certain things with like male fighters. It seems like the experience is more praised, whereas
Yeah.
sometimes with the women, like I'm looking for some of these experienced women, like I said, like you, like Cindy Danois. I think she was in that Ultimate Fighter tryout for the featherweight division.
Yep.
They didn't pick her, and I was just kind of like, I'm trying to find some names, people with experience, because when you go to the UFC, men or women, for me, I want to see some experienced fights, but it seems like even with the way they built this featherweight division, they built it for the show, but then they had them drop to 135, so.
Yep. Yeah, no, that was the other thing. Almost all the women were those that would make 35 easily, not like true featherweights, which,
Yeah.
again, there are some really tough 35 fighters, but there are more knockouts at 45. Obviously, the more weight you've got, the more KOs you can deliver. Same with the guys, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's another problem with them kind of. It'll be interesting to see what happens if the 45 sticks around, because that division has had a lot of finishes. But then you get rid of that, and you again have the unfair comparison. Women don't have knockout power. Well, it's like if you cut the men off at 135, how many KOs would you have? Probably not that many. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So this fight coming up here, it's since your last fight out, and coming back this July. If Invicta has another card, are you trying to stay active this time? Is it possible? Would you like one more fight this year, two more fights to close out the year?
Yeah, I like to fight as much as I can. Again, it gets difficult with the experience level, how many fights make sense, but yeah, I'm always looking for fights. Might do some Thai boxing too. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. You of course, your experience, a lot about competition and different fighters. Like, have they ever tried to get you to be a matchmaker? Like, sometimes just think of that stuff,
well, so I was matching at Invicta for a while during my MMA hiatus, which was awesome and a great learning experience. But then locally, I do Muay Thai fights as well. So I've done some matchmaking, which is neat because you get a different perspective when you're watching, because you don't have this. Obviously, when you're fighting, you have a different emotional investment, or when it's your fighter fighting. But you watch these things and you watch all the factors and how they play out, and you get really good at predicting outcomes. Just even stuff like how they're carrying themselves and how they're posting on social media kind of cue you off. So it's pretty neat and eye-opening experience.
So it's not like, the average fan just watching from the outside saying, oh, that person should fight that person. You really have to kind of break it down to a science.
Oh my gosh. Well, and there's always so much more that people, just like any job, there's so much more to it than people know. So it's like, okay, this person should fight this person, but they don't want to because they've got the same manager, or somebody is pregnant and just not announcing it yet, or somebody's injured and not announcing it yet. So it always cracked me up when we'd get like tweets from people about, why wouldn't they just do this? And meanwhile, like, somebody's having a thyroid problem, can't get down to weight. That's why, and of course you're not going to disclose that because it's her private information. But yeah, like almost always with matchmaking, there is more going on behind the scenes than you'd ever think. So there's a reason for it usually.
Okay. So Kaitlin, let me ask you this: for young kids, young girls, young boys, like, what would be some advice that want to get into mixed martial arts? What would be some advice you give them? Like, should they choose a specific discipline first, or do they just kind of get well-rounded like in school with more than one department subject?
I would say to choose a discipline first, but but I think it also is wise to not become elite before transitioning into with the other stuff, because you see this sometimes when someone is so heavily steeped in one, they'll keep those bad habits. Just because any sport, if you're doing it purely by itself and then you take it into MMA, there's some habits that'll get you caught with stuff. So I would say to start with one for a couple of years and then start adding more, or even mostly specialize in one, but get the MMA context earlier so you understand it and you can still mold that habit. Because a lot of the time, if people are 10, 15 years into a sport already and then they go to MMA, it's pretty tough to not still carry those. there's some exceptions, right? But um, for example, say we're talking about boxing. There's some things you can get away with in boxing that are really difficult if you add low kicks, for example, or
Right. Being more stationary, flat
yeah,
footed.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think just having that in mind
Hmm.
is good.
Okay. And what was the one discipline for you that was like the most humbling, where you felt like, oh man, this is this is like something different, like I never faced before, so I just have to really open my mind to it.
Like for my own training or like fighting against it.
For your own training.
Probably jujitsu.
Hmm.
Because there's so many things that are very different than striking. But what's funny is like when I had first been introduced to Thai boxing, I wasn't taught to clinch in the way they teach you to clinch in Thailand.
Hmm.
And then when I finally did go to Thailand, there's a lot of overlap with jujitsu, or at least the way I see it. So
Hmm.
that was really neat. But yeah, like understand the breathing is different. So many of the concepts are just very different than striking.
Hmm.
Um, and you're always trying to take away space when you're dominating somebody in jiu-jitsu, right? But in striking, that's not necessarily the case. So it's super interesting.
Mm. Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. A lot of people tell me that jujitsu is just like the one discipline where they felt like they really had to put the ego out the door. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think like when you first learn striking, if you have decent partners, they're not knocking you out every time they could.
Right.
So I think it's easier for your ego to just be like, oh, I got hit, but like you keep going.
Hmm.
When you tap to a choke, that person could kill you right now, and they're
Yeah.
choosing not to. You know what I mean? So I think
Hmm.
it's like a different sort of ego hit because that's it. That's it. You're done. And in striking, the same can be true, but you're not like faced with it the same way because you don't have to say like. And I think once people get more experience in striking, they're aware of it and they're like, oh, yep, I would have been sleeping, if
Hmm.
you had set that head kick there. But I think it's an easier thing for people to ignore. And in jiu-jitsu, you cannot ignore that. Like you are, or you can, and you're taking a nap and, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Um. So the fight's coming up in I say July 30th. When do you leave? When you actually leave for Kansas City, right? Yeah.
Yes. What's that Sunday? 30, it's
Uh.
like the 26th or something. Sunday.
Okay. You leave like what 4 days? You got to be there 4 days in advance.
Yeah. And I think they're changing up the order of the media day and that kind of thing this time.
Oh, okay, due to the whole,
Yeah.
COVID thing. So you got to be down there. Yeah, okay. The 26th. So are you prepared for that swab test and everything?
I hope they're doing a blood test.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I'll deal with it,
yeah.
I suppose.
I've seen some people do the throat swab, which might not be as bad as like the skull. Some people say
Oh, like going in through the nose. Yeah.
it really feels like they're scraping your skull. So yeah.
Ugh.
So going into this fight, are you prepared to just come in there and do what you got to do and make a statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've got some stuff I've been working on. I've got some ideas about how I think it's going to play out.
Hmm.
But I'm also mentally ready that it may not play out that way, and I'm just fighting. So
Okay. Well, sounds good. Don't want to take up too much more of your time, but one more question I just want to ask you. So what do you do to kind of just like unwind, and what's your favorite pastime besides, fighting? Anything non-combat related, what's that one thing you like to do?
I watch a lot of stand-up comedy in my downtime, like
Mm.
when your body's tired. But otherwise, I like to do stuff related to animals, like horseback riding or
Hmm.
volunteering somewhere with, like, doing puppy transport for rescue or something like that. It
Okay.
depends how much energy I have, but it's
Okay.
one of those two almost always.
Yeah, I'm like a big stand-up person. I'm watching my downtime at work. Like, who's your favorite stand-up comedian?
Oh, that's hard. I really like Bill Burr. I
Mhm.
know he's, you know, I really like him. I like Dave Chappelle, though. Interestingly, he's kind of almost becoming less of a comic, or he's kind of like entering his George Carlin type years, where he's like doing social commentary.
Yeah, that's what I
But
said.
it's good.
Like,
I
yeah.
love Wanda Sykes too.
Hmm. Yeah, Dave, like he's a goat. Like, yeah, I always watch Dave. Until I watch somebody like Sinbad too. So it
Sure.
really varies. Yeah, anybody that can just like have me rolling. It's
Hmm.
facts. It's good stuff. But yeah, Kaitlin, what's your main goal as a fighter? But what's the one goal that you really want to accomplish by the end of your career as a fighter?
Man, I don't know if I'd say there's one.
Mhm.
There's some fights I want to have. I want to. I want to fight some of the top, like really tough fighters, both in Thai boxing and MMA. But I don't have like a real specific, like it's more about like I think this will work and I want to try it.
Mhm.
But I don't feel like there's anything really specific as far as like a belt or anything like that. Like it's
Mhm.
just stuff that I want to do. I'm having a lot of fun with fighting right now, so um, I would like to have several more though, and that's something like I don't remember. This is fight 49 or 50 for me total, and I'd like to get to around 70 before I retire.
Okay, that's a good goal. I mean, it's definitely possible as long as they
I can
keep.
stay busy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You stay busy as long as they keep calling you.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. Again, thanks for coming on, Kaitlin. Thanks for taking the time out. Like I said, it was good to have like one of my favorite fighters, come through.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. But yeah, before you do go, just let everybody know where they can follow you at too.
Sure. So I'm on Instagram at Kaitlin Youngify and Twitter, Kaitlin_Young. I'm on Facebook. I'm not cool with the Snapchat and stuff. I'm old.
Hey, you ain't that old. Look, I'm a little older. I don't like I say I ain't telling age, but I'm older than you. So,
Oh shit. Okay.
but yeah, I ain't big with the Snapchat and the Twitter stuff. Like Instagram, it just seems so much easier. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks, and good luck, and don't be a stranger. Come back anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
All right, bye.
Bye. I'm Kaitlin Young. I'm fighting July 30th for Invicta FC, and you can hear me on hashtag CB99Talks.